Welcome to Lyric Lab Poetry. My name's Martin Jago, and in this video we're going to be exploring poetry for a very discerning readership. I am of course talking about poetry for children. So let's get started. Now just for a minute, cast your mind back all those long decades ago. What are your first memories of poetry? Probably it came in the form of a nursery rhyme. Can you imagine crafting a poem that's going to stay with a child right until their adult life, and then maybe on and on, decades and decades later, maybe they're going to hold that poem still in their mind and it will still hold some meaning for them. What a wonderful opportunity to have as a poet, to craft something like that, but also a heavy responsibility. We want to get this right from the outset. So let's get started. Now, the first thing I will say about this is that rather than, before we get overexcited and rush to our notebooks or our laptops and start banging away at the keys or scribbling away with the nib of a pen, let's for a moment just put pause on that. And before we action this, think about children in different stages of behavioral development and learning. It actually is a subject I think requires some research before we get to write our first poem for children, unless of course you're suddenly inspired by the muse and you put down lots of ideas. This is certainly something you would want to return to. I'm talking about the different developmental stages of child psychology, and a really good way to research that is simply to step into your local library and ask them for support. Tell them what you're trying to do and that you are looking for some kind of information on childhood development and psychology. There are lots of fantastic resources out there. And really what you want to start with is a kind of overview of the different concerns, if you like, of children at different ages. In other words, through different grades at school. What are their fears? What are their passions? What are their concerns and worries? What are the things that make children of certain ages really laugh? And what are the things that frighten them or unsettle them? And doing that basic footwork is a real honor and a responsibility, but an important one to carry out before you get to the poetry, or at least to get to it at some point in that journey of writing poetry for young audiences. The next thing to say about this is that a poem for children really, in many respects, and the way we go about it should really not be too dissimilar from the way we would go about writing a poem for any other kind of audience or any other group of readers. In other words, we're not dumbing down here. We want to make sure that all the instances of specificity, the avoidance of generalizations and cliches, and the use of literary techniques and devices are just as present or available to us were we writing a poem for adult readers. However, there seems to me to be one distinct difference between poetry for children and poetry for adults, and that is musicality. It seems to me, at least, that a lot of contemporary poetry has forgotten about sound shapes and musicality, and something that's very present and that children find appealing in poetry are things like rhythm and rhyme, the use of onomatopoeia or alliteration. These are the things that can create a sense of fun for the young reader. Humor, surprise, and wordplay are other things that kids absolutely love in poetry. What you really want to aim for is simplicity, which also has kind of depths or maybe deeper layers of meaning. And as I just said, make sure that your poem is absolutely targeted to the right age group and is thematically appropriate for that age group. Some really useful tools for engaging with young readers is the use of imagery, strong imagery, the use of sounds, play with repetition, and surprise endings are always fun in a poem for young readers. But there are also things you want to avoid, and the first one of those is an overly moralizing or preachy tone. The second one is forced rhymes and adult vocabulary. I've mentioned not dumbing down. Yes, we want to make sure that we are reaching our target audience appropriately, and that means that we're not going to babyfy the language, but at the same time we want to make sure it is appropriate to that age group. Now let's just talk for a moment about publication. Where are your poems going to end up? I've got a couple of literary magazines here. One is called The Moth. It had a sister paper called The Caterpillar. And here they both are. Wonderful magazines. Sadly, they're both out of print now, although The Moth does still continue as a poetry prize and also as a press. But its sister paper, The Caterpillar, was a fantastic literary magazine. And there are still plenty of other places in the market that you can find to submit your poetry to that are specific poetry for children by adults. Okay, I want to give you a few prompts now to really help spark your imagination and get those ideas flowing on the page. And the first poem you're going to write is The Animal Who Lost Its Sound. I don't know, this could be an elephant with the flu, it could be a mouse with a case of a really sore throat. How would the animal try to communicate if it woke up one morning and the usual sound didn't come out? What would the other animals do? How would they react to it? And around that idea, you can begin to craft a really interesting poem. The second prompt is a minute too late. Imagine a child who just misses out on something, just misses something like, I don't know, a talking tree or a dragon on a scooter that flies by while they're looking in the opposite direction. And use this to build anticipation, maybe with a twist at the end of the story. And actually this puts me in mind of many years ago, I mean a long time ago in my childhood, I can't remember who the character was, but in an edition of the Beano, which was a child's comic, I remember one story of one of the characters moping around, going around their town, and complaining about how nothing ever happened to them and nothing interesting. Meanwhile, all these amazing things were happening around the character. That stuck with me all these decades. And I think it speaks to, or the moral of the story, if you like, is that the child or the character really just needs to stop and take in the world around them instead of putting all their focus into their own worries. So it was a really interesting piece, and maybe that could form the basis of your poem. Prompt 3 is, inside my hat, I keep I don't know, it doesn't have to rhyme, but I'm thinking of a cat. And with each stanza, the thing that comes out of the hat could be more and more ridiculous. Let each stanza reveal something more surprising. You can use a repeating structure to anchor the reader. And maybe at the end of the poem, you take us back to the beginning. This is something known as framing, something that Michael Rosen, the children's author and poet, talks about. I will put a link in the description below to a poetry workshop that Michael Rosen has made for children to write poetry. But it's actually very useful also to look at that from an adult perspective. One of the things he talks about in a poem is framing, topping and tailing, or bookending. It's a very useful technique to bring the poem to a close. As always, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please do click on the like button and the subscribe button. It really helps to grow the channel. And just before I go, a final thought here. Poetry for children, we must never think about as being lesser. It can be joyful, profound, and vital. So dig in, see how you get on, and I would love to hear from you in the comments below the video. And I, of course, will be back soon with more poetry content.